and then we'll see how many people sort of start to trickle in. So right now we
Okay.
have 4. So you should see people sort of trickle in on the bottom.
Okay.
So we'll just give it a little bit here until everyone sort of starts to trickle in, and then we'll go ahead and start the presentation.
Okay, cool.
All right, so as everyone sort of trickling in, you can be more than welcome to just go on the chat and sort of tell us where you're from or your
Ooh, I like that.
And we can go ahead and start looking and stuff like that. And then maybe like in a couple of minutes here, we'll go ahead and start the presentation.
Okay, I'm gonna go in the chat and say where I'm from.
Cool. South Carolina.
Yeah, I lived in Chicago for 18 years, and then I thought I need palm trees and the beach. So
I mean, yeah, the Carolinas are beautiful. I've been to North Carolina, not South Carolina.
Yeah, it's some of the politics I don't agree with, but I do like the beaches and palm trees.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in California, so we have plenty of beaches and palm trees over here. Awesome.
But we don't have
from Michigan.
Yeah. Oh, Michigan. Yeah.
Michigan, yeah.
Hi, Seth. I'm glad a husband came too. That's awesome.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. So just for everyone that's here, going over basic Zoom logistics. I know everyone's probably had enough of Zoom, but we're going to go ahead and when you have questions, you can either use the chat or you can also use the Q&A feature. You'll see them at the bottom of the screen there. And then at the end, for the last 15 minutes, we'll go ahead and start to look through those questions and anything like that, any comments, and we'll sort of read them out and sort of have a discussion. So just to kind of start, first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for sort of trickling in and joining us. And I'd like to thank Jessica for agreeing to do the webinar with us. And we are the Riverside Medical Clinic Charitable Foundation. So we are a foundation based in Riverside, California. And we do a lot of health education and health promotion. And this is part of our endometriosis webinar series here. And I'd like to thank also our sponsor, the Riverside Medical Clinic, who is our largest sponsor in allowing us to do this presentation. And a little bit about Jessica. So Jessica is an endo warrior herself. And she's also the author of 2 cookbooks, 1 cookbook and 1 book. By the way, those recipes in that one part plant are amazing.
Oh, good.
Yes, I do the breakfast bowl and the chilaquiles.
Oh, yay.
I'm a plant-based person myself, so amazing.
Thank you.
And then at the end as well, Jessica has agreed to raffle off one of her books. So we're going to raffle off the Know Your Endo book. And we're going to go ahead and do that at the end. So we'll go ahead and someone will get an email from me and they'll be surprised to get that raffle. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jessica and she'll go ahead and do the presentation.
Okay, cool. Share screen. Here it is. Okay. Okay, can everyone see that? Joe, can you see?
I can see.
Okay, cool. So thank you for the intro. I'm very excited to be here. I'm not going to go deep into my story, but I do have endo myself. I've had multiple surgeries for it. I actually just started my period. So I am doing this presentation in a bed right now. I thought that if anyone would understand doing a presentation in bed, everyone would be cool with that here. So like Joe said, I have written 2 books, 1 part plant and Know Your Endo. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is in Know Your Endo. I kind of condensed it down into more bite-sized, but if you have to leave for some reason or you want more information, like everything that we're talking about plus more is in Know Your Endo. And then 1 part plant is a cookbook that I wrote really about the food that changed my life. Anti-inflammatory foods really started to help me manage my endo. It was the first tool that I thought, oh, maybe I should investigate more tools. So today we're going to talk about managing endometriosis. And I think that can be a very intimidating thing because if you go online and you Google that endo diet or best movement for endo or supplements for endo, you are going to find millions of different things of people saying. Some people say that some supplements are bad. Some people say they're the best. Some people say that yoga is too much for the endo. Some people say it saved their life. Some people say that bread is evil. Some people say it's great. So it can be extremely intimidating to know where to begin, especially when you just maybe have gotten this tough diagnosis or you've been battling with endo for a while. It's really hard to know where to start. And I interviewed so many people for my book, and so many of them said, I want to start managing my endo, but I don't even know where to start. So I just don't even try. So the one thing that I always say for this is that for endo, there are no rules, laws, or traditions that apply universally, including this one. So there's not going to be one endo diet for everyone or one supplement that's going to work best for everyone. It's truly finding what works best for you. And sometimes that can be a little bit of trial and error. I know that for myself, it took me for a while to figure out the foods that make me feel good. And even up until last year, I'm still kind of tweaking what movement I do and tweaking my stress management tools. And I think especially during, with the pandemic, it's even fine tuning that more, because some things that I did that helped me pre-COVID might not be helping me as much, or I don't have access to them anymore. So it's a constantly, tweaking and figuring out what best works best for you, which again can be intimidating. But I think the one thing that I always keep in mind, and I want everyone to take this in and just say it out loud if you can, put yourself on mute if you want me to hear you say it. But if you're a person living with endometriosis, caring for yourself has to be your number one priority. And I will say that again, because I think sometimes it's hard to accept that. And I think that a lot of times we think, well, that's really selfish. What about school, my family, my friends, my responsibilities? But if you are a person living with endometriosis, caring for yourself has to be your number one priority. And when you take care of yourself, if you still have problems thinking about putting yourself first, when you take care of yourself, you are going to be a better friend, be better at school, be better at work, because you're going to actually have more time. You're going to actually feel better. And you just deserve it. I think so many of us with endo, we push through. We oftentimes think that our pain is not as much as it is because our pain has been dismissed. It took us a long time to get a diagnosis. So we don't even think that we deserve to take care of ourselves, but you deserve to take care of yourself. And it makes me emotional to think about, because I, for a long time, didn't think that I deserved that care myself. So where do you even start, right? Because we're talking about every plan is different, and how do I even start? I think the first place to really, really think about is defining your best living with endometriosis. Because I think that with social media or even in our real life, we oftentimes compare ourselves to people that aren't living with endo, right? So we see the beautiful woman on Instagram that is eating all these different things. She's going to yoga, and then she's doing a hike, and then she's doing all these things that on a lot of days you're capable of walking around the block. So then we push ourselves and we don't think that we're good enough, or we don't think we're trying enough. But your best might look very different than someone that doesn't have endometriosis. So I have really checked myself a lot in the past 10 years, because I've been working on these tools now for 10 years and really managing my endo with them. And for a long time, I really tried to get better and better and better, until I realized maybe some of this is my best with endo. Maybe being able to sit up and do this presentation for you right now on the first day of my period is pretty amazing, but maybe I'm not able to go for a run today. Like, my best right now is sitting up in this bed and not laying down in this bed. So I think really thinking about what is your best, and not only living that best, but being really proud of that best, because endometriosis is a full body condition. It affects us mentally, physically. It can impact our relationships, our work. And so we really need to remember that we are always doing our best. So once you're able to sort of define what your best is, and I'm not saying you have to do that today or even this week, it kind of takes a while for that to sink in and get good at that. But I think the top four tools that I use to manage my endo every single day or most days is one, and we're going to go through these, is one, knowing your endo. Number two is stress management. Number three is good food. And number four is movement. Now, I think that for everybody with endo, you'll start to find once you start practicing tools and kind of getting good at the tools, that some are going to have priority over others. So for myself, good food is a non-negotiable for me. Good food is what I manage my endo best with. But for you, your biggest tool might be stress management. Your biggest tool might be movement. So as you start to get to know them better, you can kind of see what's working best for you. So let's start with know your endo. So, and by the way, any questions that you have, please put them in the chat and we will talk about them when the presentation's over, and feel free as I'm talking to leave any questions or comments. So know your endo. I think you're like, I know I have endo, that's why I'm here. But I think that when I talk about knowing your endo, I am talking about truly understanding the condition and how it impacts your life on a day-to-day basis. And I think so many of us don't even realize how much it impacts us, not just on our periods, but like I said, through work, through our social life, through our relationships. And so if you could do me a favor, I'm going to show this next slide, and I want you to take some time and identify all of the symptoms that you have. And I'm going to show you this big list. You can have one symptom, you can have all of these symptoms. This is not an endo competition, and you could have one symptom and feel in more pain than someone that has all the symptoms. So let's just not compare in this moment, but let's just take a look at this list, okay? So these are all the symptoms of endo, and some of these might be a surprise to you. So very painful periods. This is a huge misconception that everyone with endo has painful periods. There are some people with endo that don't have a painful period ever, but they might have pain during ovulation. They might have leg pain, hip pain, shoulder, chest pain, pain or during or after sex. And when I talk about pain during or after sex, one thing that I never knew until years later after my endo diagnosis is that for a lot of people that have pain during or after sex, it's not the physical act of the penetration or the sex itself, because people have all types of sex. It's the orgasm that gives them the pain. And that pain might show up 2 hours later. It might show up the next day. So when people hear the word painful sex or for the phrase painful sex, they think it's just the act of sex, but it can really be the orgasm that is causing the pain. Thick blood clots, painful bowel movements, painful urination, excessive bleeding, fatigue, and chronic pain. I think fatigue is so huge with people with endo, and it's one that so many people don't realize is a symptom of endo. I have talked to so many people that didn't know that fatigue was a symptom of endo, and that for years of their life, they thought that they were lazy, unmotivated, antisocial, because these are also things that they have been told about themselves. So fatigue is a huge symptom of endo, and I think it's one that is often dismissed a lot and that we don't put enough weight on. So diarrhea and constipation, bloating, nausea, vomiting, urinary frequency, retention or urgency, allergies and other immune-related issues, and infertility and pregnancy loss. Okay, so now that we've seen this entire list and you've identified symptoms that you maybe are experiencing now, symptoms maybe that you've experienced in the past, let's think about this. So this is truly knowing your endo. How have these symptoms impacted your life or shaped how you feel about yourself? I know we gave that example of fatigue, people thinking that they were lazy or unmotivated. I know that for myself, and I write about this a couple times in the book. I have had really bad urinary symptoms. I would pee my pants a lot. And I write in the book, I peed my pants in a very, very fancy museum in Chicago. And I remember having to go to the bathroom after peeing my pants and being in this beautiful museum and not knowing what to do with my underwear. Do I throw them away? Do I keep them on? And I didn't know that was a symptom of endo. So for all of these years of my life, peeing my pants, feeling like I was a gross person, feeling like I couldn't control my urine. And then when I finally found out that that was a symptom of endo, it changed how I saw myself. I wasn't this gross person that couldn't make it to the bathroom. It was a symptom of a chronic condition that I have. And I think so many of us, I'll give another example of a lot of my body dysmorphia and body issues in the past. And sometimes they still creep up. I have a lot of inflammation to the point where I look like I'm 3 months pregnant a lot of times, maybe even 4 or 5 months pregnant. And the amount of times I've been asked if I've been pregnant in my life I can't even count the amount of times. And when you are a young person growing up and almost every week you're asked, are you pregnant? It starts to make you think about how your body is looking to the outside world. And if you're getting that feedback from everyone, and not only are you getting that feedback, but you also don't feel comfortable in your body, it's hard sometimes to see your body as a body that you love. So I really would love, after this presentation, if you really think about the symptoms of endo and how that's impacted how you feel about yourself and how it shaped the way that you see yourself. Because I think it's so important sometimes not sometimes, all the time, to separate what's your endo and what is you, because they can really get a little bit conflated at times, and it can harm us in so many ways. And so after you take a look at those answers of how endo has impacted your life and how it shaped how you see yourself, how do those answers make you feel? Do they make you sad? Do they make you mad? Do they have more compassion? Do you have more compassion for yourself? Are you fired up to make change? I think it's so important to, sit with those emotions. I think it's very hard sometimes to sit with those emotions. I think as soon as we are feeling that sadness, we just want to pick up our phone and distract ourselves. I like watching a lot of TV to distract myself a lot of times from my thoughts. But I think it's so important to really just tune in for a minute and think how these things have impacted your life and how endo is maybe just more than painful periods like people have been telling you. And so other things about endo that you might not know, and this is not a list to be depressing because we're going to talk about a lot of positive things about managing endo, but 90% of people with endo have GI symptoms. That's not something a lot of people know. A person living with endo loses 7 to 10 hours of productivity every week. People with endo have a higher rate of developing comorbidities, and comorbidities means multiple health conditions at one time, including depression and anxiety. And getting pregnant, hormone therapies, and a hysterectomy are not treatments for endo. These are things that you might have never known before. These are maybe things that have impacted your life and you didn't know that was connected to endo. But I think that this is really getting to know your endo. It's why I named my book Know Your Endo. It's why my platform is called Know Your Endo, because this is a complex full body condition. And I think that we have to know these things, because with endo, knowledge is power, and not just knowledge for ourselves, but to be able to get the care that we deserve, to be able to walk into a doctor's office and say, these are my symptoms. No, I don't have painful periods, but I have all of these symptoms, or I'm fatigued, or I'm having ovulation pain. It's very hard sometimes to advocate for ourselves with endometriosis because so many of us have been dismissed. And the average diagnosis time for endometriosis is 8 to 10 years. 8 to 10 years. Yet 1 in 10 people born with a vagina have endometriosis. So getting to know your endo, having this knowledge is so powerful to be able to choose a doctor, to be able to say no to a doctor that tells you to get pregnant as a treatment for endo. That is not a treatment for endometriosis. And being able to have all that knowledge is going to give you advocacy for yourself, and it's going to help you get better care that you deserve. I get very fired up about this topic because I just so many of us have been dismissed, and I want us all to be able to learn how to advocate for ourselves better. And if you're not able to advocate for yourself right now because you don't feel confident, find an advocate for you. Maybe it's bringing a friend to your doctor's appointment. Maybe it's bringing a family member that also has this knowledge that can speak up for you. It's just so important to get to know your endo. So the second tool that is one of my biggest tools is stress management. And I think that we all know that stress management is important. I think we've all seen people to tell us to meditate, especially during what's happening with the pandemic. You know, it's been a lot of stress, but I think specifically for endometriosis, this quote, by this researcher, Dr. Bettina Top, is just so powerful in explaining why it's so important for people with endo to find stress management practices. So she said, the wealth of published evidence supporting that, one, endometriosis is associated with a poor quality of life and high stress perception. And two, endometriosis is an inflammatory disease. And three, stress and poor quality of life may cause inflammation, strongly suggested that women with endometriosis are stuck between a rock and a hard place with the vicious cycle of high stress perception, inflammation, and disease progression. This is a lot of words to basically say that stress can actually increase our pain. And that for a lot of us, we feel like we're in this vicious cycle because we're stressed about life, we're stressed about our endo, which increases our inflammation, which increases our stress. And it can feel like you're trapped in your body so much. And I don't know if a lot of you have felt this way, but there's been a lot of times where I felt trapped. I felt trapped in my endo. I felt trapped within my body because of my high stress, because of my inflammation. And I think it's so important to find tools that you can begin to manage the stress, which in turn could potentially manage some inflammation and pain. So Dr. Bettina talked about, this cycle, the vicious cycle. And I think that, when we're talking about stress management, it's disrupting that cycle. What are ways that we can disrupt this constant cycle of stress, inflammation, pain, stress, inflammation, pain? And I think the best way to begin to do this, and again, I wish that we had 20 hours to do this, but this is just a condensed version of everything I talk about in the book. But how to begin? First of all, we want to identify our stressors. What are the stressors in your life right now? Is it money? Is it your endo? Is it relationships? I think that a lot of times we don't even know the stressors in our life. And I think that with a lot of stressors, like let's say your mom is stressing you out. Maybe you just don't text your mom back, or maybe you don't have a conversation with your mom. Let's say that money is stressing you out. Maybe you're looking for a new job, or maybe you're cutting back on coffees that you get out. But with endo, that is a stressor that will always be there. So it's so important to begin to manage that and identify, how is endo stressing me out? Being able to just write that down and truly getting to know your endo in that way can be extremely powerful. And then the second thing, and let me tell you, self-compassion was something I had zero interest in before I started reading the research on it. But I think that self-compassion, learning it and actually practicing self-compassion practices is the number one way to begin to manage our stress. And what self-compassion is, Dr. Kristen Neff has done extensive research on self-compassion. So this isn't a woo-woo yoga, meditate. This is a documented, scientifically researched way of treating ourselves better. So our brains are wired to automatically go to the negative, right? This comes from a very long time ago of, if you see a tiger in the jungle and you think, tiger, I'll just kind of he's cool. I'll just kind of walk away. No, you run. Our bodies automatically go to the negative. And with endo and with chronic pain, we oftentimes go to the negative first. And that's not our fault that we're doing that. Our brains are wired this way. So what self-compassion is doing is it's listening to your nervous system and it's listening to your brain, and it's telling your body and your brain, I am here to take care of you. I am here to give you compassion. And so it works. I mean, the crazy thing is that it works. Let me give you an example of how I started practicing self-compassion. So there was a day that my husband was traveling and I was at home alone with my son, and I started my period. And I couldn't just stay in bed. I had to get up. I had to take care of my son. I had meetings the whole day. I didn't have an option to call in sick that day. So I thought, okay, I'm going to practice self-compassion. The first thing I did was I woke up and I said, okay, body, what do you need right now? I went and I picked my loosest pair of period underwear. I picked my flowiest dress to put on. So I know that for myself, if I have tight clothes or things, it kind of makes my pain worse. And then I fed my son breakfast and I laid on the floor and did a foam rolling exercise as he ate breakfast. And then for my meeting, I thought I looked horrible. I call it the fatigue face. I'm sure a lot of you know that first day of period fatigue face. And I put on sparkling shoes. I put on a lot of makeup. I put on a hat just to kind of feel better about myself. And that's self-compassion. It's not standing in front of the mirror and saying, I love you, you're the greatest person, because for a lot of us, those mantras don't work. Self-compassion is telling your brain, I am here to care for you. And I really encourage you, if you are interested in this at all, of retraining yourself to let yourself know that you are there to care for yourself, please pick up Dr. Kristen Neff's book. It's just called Self-Compassion. It's an incredible resource. She even has courses on it that you can take. And then third, finding practical stress management practices. And I say practical because I think that so many of us will read online about people that are meditating 2 hours a day, they're going on these retreats, they're doing all these things, and it's just not practical for most of our lives. And so finding practical stress management practices, ones that you know that you can afford, ones that you'll be consistent with, and ones that are right for your body. There's been research that is so interesting that I actually have included in my book, that people that have experienced high stress for most of their life and people that have experienced traumatic experiences, which is a lot of people with endo, meditation can actually increase their anxiety. So if you have ever meditated and thought, wow, this is not for me, or I feel more anxious after, it's because for a lot of us, it's increasing our anxiety. And so if you want to have a meditative practice, but maybe you're not there yet, there's something called grounding that you can do, which is actually just holding a rock in your hand or holding an object in your hand and just focusing on, how does this feel in my hand? What are the sounds around me as I'm feeling this in my hand? It might sound a little bit cheesy, but it's a way to sort of calm your body down without having to sit and meditate if meditation is not making you feel good. Another one of my stress management practices is I love doing puzzles. I don't know what it is, but just being able to be focused on a puzzle in front of me just calms my body down. Another one of my stress management practices is treading water in a pool. There is something very calming about the water on my body. So finding stress management practices can be so powerful because they're your stress management practices. So I think that one of the biggest things with all of these tools is sort of to shut out the noise that we hear about what's best for my brain, what's best for my endo, and find the ones that you like the best. Because who's going to want to practice stress management practices if you don't like what you're doing? They're actually going to make you more stressed. And then I think the third thing I always like to include is asking for help. And I think it's a lot it can be very difficult for a lot of us with endo to ask for help, because I think we are fantastic at pushing through. I think we get really good at doing things in pain that other people don't ever have pain doing. Asking for help can be such a critical part of living with endo. And when I'm talking about asking for help, I'm talking about asking for professional help, whether that means finding a counselor, and that counselor could be online. If it's not in your budget, a lot of them work on sliding scales. You can also find a lot of counselors that will work online that have free practices. Asking for help can also mean asking a friend to pick you up dinner because you're not feeling so great and you're in bed. Asking for help is having someone come with you to a doctor's appointment to help advocate for you. I think that, like I said, I think with chronic pain, we get so good about hiding our pain that sometimes we're too embarrassed to admit that we need help. But asking for help can feel so freeing and just really help reduce our stress. Okay, I know we're going through these quick, but we only have 45 minutes. So I just want to make sure that we get to kind of cover these tools. And like I said, they're all very much expanded in the book. So the third tool that I use, which is my first tool that I ever discovered to manage my endo, is good foods. And before we even start to talk about food is not going to stop your endo from growing. It is not going to make a cyst go away. In some days, it's not even going to make all of your pain go away. But what good food can do is it can help reduce inflammation. And that is the power of good food. So I already told you before that there is not one endo diet. And every endo diet online is very, very different. Some include eggs, some don't, some have meat, some don't, some say coffee's okay, some say it's not. So I think we should just ditch the idea of the endo diet. And what I like to do is focus on good foods. And so what are good foods for endo? Good foods are foods that nourish and energize you, foods that don't hurt you or make your endo symptoms feel worse. And good foods are not a restrictive diet, steamed broccoli and rice for every meal, a static plan that can never change, the magic solution to get skinny, a cure for endo, or a universal standard. Meaning, again, there is not one endo diet for everyone. Good foods are truly foods that make you feel good. And so my good foods might be completely different than your good foods. But the big question is, does diet actually matter? Because there are no conclusive studies to prove it. Your doctor might be saying that diet won't make a difference. You might say that you don't have time to do it or it's too hard. But I do believe that diet and endo do matter. And let me tell you why. So if endometriosis at its core is an inflammatory condition, wouldn't a diet rich in lower inflammatory foods be helpful? Wouldn't cutting back on inflammatory foods potentially help a body that is chronically inflamed? Now, there aren't a lot of conclusive studies to prove this yet with endo, but we do have a ton of studies to prove that anti-inflammatory or lower inflammatory diets can help an inflammatory condition. So where do you start to build a good foods foundation? Like I said, because it's so different for everyone, it can be extremely intimidating and hard to know where to start. I think that a great way to start is by focusing on low inflammatory foods and eliminating or just limiting at first the BIs. And the BIs are the big inflammatories. Those are dairy, sugar, alcohol, processed foods. And I do want to tell you that when I first changed my diet, I cried for about 3 weeks about not being able to eat dairy. I cried about how sugar made me feel bad. I was actually sad that sugar made me feel bad because I love sugar so much. So this isn't something where you have to go cold turkey about it. This isn't something that might be easy in the beginning. But the powerful thing is that for a lot of us, this will eliminate or limit our inflammation and really truly make us be able to manage things a little bit better. So number 2 is going for plant heavy and whole food meals and snacks. I'm not talking about the store whole foods. I'm talking about whole foods. So veggies, fruits, nuts, grains, legumes, seeds in the wholest form that you can find. And my cookbook, One Part Plant, there are so many easy recipes because, again, when I first changed my diet, I cried a lot because I didn't know how to cook. I didn't even know how to make rice in the beginning. I had to teach myself not only how to cook, but I had to teach myself how to cook in a way that I had never eaten before. So now I'm completely plant-based. Like I said, it's probably my biggest tool for endo. And now I'm not turning back. It's been 10 years, but in the beginning, it was a little bit difficult for me. And if it's difficult for you, I just say choose easy recipes. You don't have to make, a 10-layer, fancy cake or something. You can make 3-ingredient energy balls. Like, this doesn't have to be elaborate all the time. It can be simple. And the third thing is to really check in about how certain foods make you feel, especially during your cycle. I know for myself, I can eat sourdough pretty well, but I stay away from that during the first couple of days of my period because it kind of makes me have more inflammation. Sugar, like I said, is my favorite. During my period, I just don't even look at sugar because it increases my inflammation. I might have sugar other times of the month, but I know how it makes me feel during my period. For you, it might impact you more while you're ovulating. It might not impact you at all, but I think it's important to really check in and ask yourself how certain foods are starting to make you feel, especially during your cycle. And like I said, ease into it. It's why I called my cookbook, One Part Plant, because it's about taking one meal at a time. It does not have to be all or nothing. If you ate a bunch of stuff that made you feel bad, you can eat a bunch of stuff that makes you feel better the next day. This isn't a diet. This isn't something that you have to be perfect at. It's about easing into it. And again, I kind of just said this on the last slide, but once you find the foods that make you feel good, you're not bad if you don't eat them all of the time. I think that for a lot of us, if you come from a place of disordered eating, it can feel really intimidating. It can feel mentally challenging. So if you're struggling with this, if you can work with someone that can help you with that, maybe a nutritionist that is focused on disordered eating, I think it can be incredibly helpful. And then last, if every food is giving you digestive issues, even after you're changing your diet, you're like, wow, I've really cut out a lot of the inflammatories, but even broccoli is making me feel bloated. It could be really important to talk to a GI specialist or a doctor, because as I mentioned before, 90% of people with endo have GI symptoms. So bloating, gas, constipation. And a lot of times this is connected to our endo. So it's important to talk to a doctor if every single food is making you have digestive issues. Okay, last one. We have a couple more minutes left, is movement. So I used to get very upset when people would tell me to move my body to help my endometriosis because I could barely make it out of bed. So I don't know how they would expect me to run around the neighborhood or do an intense cardio class. It used to make me so upset. But then I started researching more, and this quote comes from Heba Shahid, and she's actually a physical therapist that works with people with endo. And when I read this, everything made so much sense to me as to why it's so important to move our bodies with endo. So it says, because people with endometriosis often spend a lot of time in pain, often curled up in bed, the muscles and connective tissue in the pelvis, abdomen, back, and hips become tight and sore as well. It's important to keep the body moving to allow the muscles and connective tissue to lengthen and allow the nerves to slide and glide freely within the tissues. So the tricky thing about this is, and through the work of Heba Shahid and other physical therapists, is if we're not moving our body, we could actually be increasing our pain, which feels like one of those cruel, vicious cycles that we talked about before with stress. So knowing this, it's so important to move our body. But I think, again, we see people online doing CrossFit, flipping tires, running marathons, and we think, well, if I can't do that, then I can't do anything. But there are so many ways that we can move our body. And I think, I've listed some here, and they might be some that you've not even thought about doing, but foam rolling is probably one of my most powerful tools for my endo. When I'm about to start my period, or if I'm on my period, I do foam rolling. And there's a bunch of foam rolling exercises in the Know Your Endo book, but you can also find them on a YouTube video online. It's really lengthening my body. So I'm doing the movement right now. It's lengthening my body. It's helping my joints. It's helping that connective tissue, just like Heba Shahid was talking about. And the other day, my son was taking his swim lessons, and I decided to bring my suit, and I jumped in the pool in the deep end. And for those 30 minutes that he was doing his swim lessons, I was just tread water. That's not something I ever thought I could do, because I thought, well, if I can't do that really intense HIIT workout, then I can't do anything at all. But I think that even if we're laying in bed and we don't think that we can do anything, we can still stretch. We can even just, raise our arms. We can move our legs, just so we're always making sure that we're moving our body a little bit. One last thing I want to talk about with movement, we've got 4 more minutes, is that a lot of times people with chronic pain, specifically people with chronic pelvic pain, they avoid movement in fear of increasing their pain. And this behavior is actually called fear avoidance, meaning that the anticipation of pain can make us want to avoid activity and movement altogether. I'm not sure if anyone has ever experienced that. I know for myself, I've experienced that so much. I've had cysts that have ruptured, and I think, oh my gosh, if I do that, is it going to rupture a cyst? What's going to happen to my pain? I don't want to increase the pain that I'm already in. But now we know how important movement is. So the way to sort of combat this fear avoidance is pacing. It's truly pacing yourself and asking yourself, when you wake up in the morning, what am I capable of in this moment? What can I do today? So if you woke up planning to do a huge walk around the neighborhood, maybe you're planning to run or rock climb or something, and you're like, wow, I think the only thing I can do today is foam rolling, or maybe a gentle yoga class on YouTube. That's okay. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's so important with movement to pace yourself. So then last, it's not in the main tools list, but this is probably one of my most favorite tools for endo. It's celebrating your wins. This is a part that I get emotional about, because I think that so many times with endo, we beat ourselves up about what we can't do. And we have to remember what we can do. And we have to remember and be proud of what we can do on our periods. And so in the Know Your Endo book, it is a huge part of the book of celebrating your wins. And actually on Know Your Endo, the Instagram account, people submit their wins on little Post-it notes once a week. And I share them once a week on Instagram. And here, I'll show you a couple of them. This person said that she hadn't taken pain medication in a year. This person wore jeans with minor discomfort. That's the thing with endo, wearing jeans, that can be a huge win for a lot of us. Some of these are about, this one woman that submitted one asked to change her workload so she could find a job that she could work from home, because going to the office was too much for her during her pain days. So celebrating your wins is so important. And if you want to celebrate your win, feel free to DM me at Know Your Endo, because the Know Your Endo Wednesday is one of my most favorite days of the week. So that is what I have to say about managing tools. And like I said, these are my 2 books. One Part Plant is just full of whole food, plant-based meals, like we were talking about before. And then Know Your Endo is just a 70,000 word expanded view of what we talked about today. And then this is places where you can find me. Okay.
Awesome. That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all that information and your story. And just what I've been seeing in the chat is a lot of people have been relating to everything that you've been saying. And that's giving someone validation that they're not alone. So, I mean, that's amazing in and of itself. I think we have a couple questions coming in.
Okay, cool.
One of them was, I have a really hard time differentiating what could be an emergency or what's a symptom, which then leads me to have these sort of anxious thoughts. Should I go to the ER? Is my appendix bursting? Kind of that spiral. And how do you do your best to differentiate those?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. That actually happened to me a couple weeks ago. I think maybe a cyst twisted and I was in a lot of pain. And my husband was like, we need to get you to the emergency room. But I knew what that pain felt like from the past. And I thought, if I go to the emergency right now, they're going to put me through a bunch of tests and then basically send me home saying, we don't know what it is. So I think that I always think it's important to go. If you feel like this is an emergency situation, I probably should have gone last week. It was probably a bonehead thing to not actually go. But the next day I did set up an appointment with my doctor to, take a look at what was happening inside. I think that with endo, I said this a million times in the presentation, we are so good at pushing through our pain and not thinking that it's that big of a deal. I think that our best day some days could be someone else's worst nightmare. So I think that if you are feeling that pain, I think call someone to come help you if you can. And I think that trust yourself, because if you think it's that bad, you're usually right.
Then we have another question. I am terrified of becoming a mom because of endo and the fatigue. And well, you're a mom, so do you have any advice?
Oh my gosh, that just made me. So I actually wrote a piece. I'm only emotional because I just love my son so much. I actually wrote a piece for Mother Magazine, and maybe we could include this somewhere. I can find it, but
Yeah.
so it's such a fear, right? Because you have a problem yourself managing your own day. Like, how are you supposed to manage someone else with the fatigue? But I think, in that piece, what I wrote about is, I never make my son feel like he needs to take care of me in any way. But my son knows what a period is. He knows what endometriosis is. He knows that on the first day of my period that we're going to have maybe a little bit of a different day, and I make it a fun thing. So he's not allowed to watch shows during the week or play video games during the week with school. But on the first and second day of my period, we can do whatever we want in my bed. So just today, we actually watched Lego Masters in bed. And, when he came home from school, I was like, guess what? It's the first day of my period. We get to watch Lego Masters in bed. And he's like, yes. And so I think, again, never putting that burden on your child, but including them in it. And I think that fatigue is very real. And I think that going into it, I think, aside from making sure that your family knows about what's up, I think having a supportive partner, because I think there's a lot of people with endo that find themselves doing everything, the cooking, the cleaning, the everything. I was not having that at all. So going into having a child, my husband knew that because of my endo, he's probably going to have to do a lot of the things some months. And it's been very 50-50, almost 60-40, 60 on him a lot of times. So I think, and if you're a single person having a kid, just knowing that you have a support network, just to say like, hey, I need some help making dinner tonight. But you find hacks and you find tweaks. And I understand that fear, but I think if you have endo, generally you're a badass, and I think you'll be able to do it.
And then on a lighter note,
yeah,
do you have any recommendations for pants?
Yes.
Any brands that you personally use?
Okay, so if this person is on Instagram, Shannon, if you're on Instagram, on Know Your Endo's Instagram, I actually posed this question to the endo community, and I got probably 100 responses with pants. And then someone in the Know Your Endo community went and compiled all of those. And there's a big graphic in Know Your Endo right now that says best endo pants. And there's probably 60 pant suggestions from people with endo. So I would suggest finding that on the Know Your Endo Instagram page, and just like, it's gold. There are so many answers. But I wear a lot of caftans and dresses. That's kind of my solution to pants.
All right, that was pretty much it for questions. And everyone's saying, thank you so much. You were incredible with the answers. So thank you again so much for being a part of our webinar series.
Yeah, of course. Wait, I see one more. Can we just answer
yes.
this one more from Tara?
Oh, yeah. Go for it.
Okay, with pacing the other day, I was feeling okay. I thought I could do some. Yeah. Oh, that is such a good question, because I feel like, so Tara's asking that sometimes when we think that we're okay in the moment of doing the workout, we don't feel good the next day. And I think, gosh, that happened to me really recently. I was staying at a friend's house and she had a Peloton, and I was like, I'm going to try Peloton for the first time. And I just went way too hard. And the next day I felt it hard. So I don't know that there's an easy answer to this one. I think that the only thing I could suggest is maybe sort of track when you're having that type of pain. So maybe when you did the gentle yoga, were you ovulating then? Were you about to start your period? Because I know for me, when I did that Peloton, I was in my ovulation phase, and I shouldn't have done it then because I have a cyst, and it kind of made the cyst worse. So I think the only thing to do with pacing is maybe start to track when your pain is the worst and maybe avoid those movements during that time. That's what I would say about that. It's hard to always be able to pace perfectly.
Awesome. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Unless anyone has any other questions or comments they'd like to share before we go ahead and sort of say goodbye to everyone.
Thanks everyone for being here. I feel like with endo people, it's like my people.
Thank you for everyone that joined.
Yeah, a lot of times you don't have endo friends in real life. So these groups are so important. Thank you for having it.
Yep. All right, so we'll go ahead and end it. And again, thank you so much for being a part of our webinar series. And thank you to everyone for joining in and sort of seeing this live. And for those that couldn't make it in live, we'll go ahead and we'll have this on YouTube, so that way we can sort of share your voice with more people on our platform here.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, everyone have a good night. And I know for you, with your 3 hours earlier, so it's already what, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock of the day. Yeah. So have a good night.
Okay, bye.
All right, bye.